In the spring of 1962, a Haitian peasant known as Clarvius Narcisse sought medical attention at the Albert Schweitzer Hospital in Deschapelles, complaining of fever, body aches, and general malaise. Despite the physician's efforts, he rapidly deteriorated and was pronounced dead on May 2, 1962. His body was identified by his sister and laid to rest in a cemetery north of his village. Fast forward to 1980, 18 years later, a man claiming to be Clarvius approached his sister in the marketplace. He revealed intimate details known only to close family members, convincing them of his identity. The man asserted that he had been turned into a zombie by his brother due to a land dispute. After his supposed resurrection, he was forced into slave labor with other zombies. He was later freed when the zombie owner passed away, but he didn't dare return to his village until his brother's death. The case gained significant attention within Haiti and even drew interest from the BBC, which created a documentary about his story. Eventually, even the researchers came to believe in his story, that he was indeed made into a zombie. This was followed by a series of investigations that identified the zombie phenomenon as purely due to a chemical drug administered to simulate death in a person. The entire zombie phenomenon has been so-called demystified, and it has become evident that there is a scientific basis to the phenomenon. But is that really true? In this video, I will seek to demonstrate that once the full story is told, there is actually much more than meets the eye. In other words, I will attempt to show that this demystified phenomenon has supernatural elements that were lost or ignored by the scientific community. To achieve this, I will explain the zombie phenomenon in Haiti from different angles, the process of how it's done, the different variations involved, and how it's tied to the beliefs of the Voodoo religion. Much of the information is drawn from the book, The Serpent and the Rainbow, a Harvard scientist's astonishing journey into the secret societies of Haitian Voodoo, zombies, and magic, by Wade Davis. We start with an introduction to the characters involved in the making of a zombie, specifically the Bokor, a voodoo practitioner who possesses dark magical knowledge and can turn anyone into a zombie, including Haitians living abroad or foreigners. The counteracting force to that is the ange, a practitioner of the light persuasion, who needs to be familiar with evil to combat it. Thus, both the Bokor and ange are familiar with the creation as well as the solution to resolving a zombie issue. There are said to be 4 preparations used to create zombies: tum leave, retire bon ange, Tuesday, and leave. One of these preparations caused immediate death, another resulted in skin rot, and a third caused a slow wasting away of the victim. All these potent preparations shared a common ingredient, the crapaud de mer, the most toxic type of puffer fish found in Haitian waters. The levels of tetrodotoxin, the deadly substance in puffer fish, were not consistent. They varied according to factors such as sex, geographical location, and the time of year. Puffers from different regions and species displayed diverse patterns of toxicity. For instance, the Brazilian Tetradon psittacus was only poisonous in June and July, while Japanese species showed increased toxicity in December, reaching its peak in May or June. The best zombie powders were therefore made during the hot months of summer and then stored and distributed throughout the year. The preparation involved 3 stages. In the first stage, a snake and booga toad were buried together in a jar until they died from rage. Then, ground millipedes and tarantulas were mixed with 4 plant products, including seeds of cha-cha, consigne, leaves of pomme cajou, and brezelet, members of the poison ivy family that cause severe dermatitis. The second degree added 2 plants called tremblator and dismember, while the third degree included 4 other plants causing severe topical irritations. These included maman geeps and mashasha, members of the stinging nettle family, Dieffenbachia seguin, and bwa pine, a plant with sharp spines. The third stage also included tarantulas, skins of the white tree frog, booga toad, and 4 species of puffer fish. The powder likely contained ground glass, intentionally breaking the victim's skin during administration. Once created, it must be applied onto the victim. One way is to spread it in the shape of a cross on the victim's doorway. However, it could also be placed inside someone's shoe or down their back. Typical symptoms of poisoning by the zombie powder include discomfort, paleness, dizziness, and tingling in lips and tongue, which can progress to extremities. Early signs involve excessive salivation, sweating, weakness, low body temperature, and gastrointestinal issues. Pupils may constrict initially but later become dilated. Respiratory distress intensifies, leading to the skin turning blue. Muscular twitching worsens, resulting in extensive paralysis. Eventually, eyes become glassy, and in severe cases, the patient may become comatose before death. If a person didn't die from the powder or suffocation in the tomb, when a zombie was taken from the grave, it was force-fed a paste consisting of 3 ingredients: sweet potato, cane syrup, and datura stramonium. Datura is a hallucinogen that, at high doses, can also cause very similar symptoms to those reported happening to the zombies. In fact, in the book, the author initially hypothesizes that datura was responsible for the zombie phenomenon. So far, everything that has been said conforms totally with scientific thought. A powder with tetrodotoxin from puffer fishes will lead to a person adopting characteristics simulating death, then be buried, and dug out later by the Bokor and made into a zombie slave. But that's not all. Now, let's delve into the supernatural elements of the zombie phenomenon. Before that, we need to understand Haitian Voodoo. In Voodoo thought, a person is made up of 5 components: corps cadavre, ange, zombification, gros bon ange, and ti bon ange. The corps cadavre is the physical body itself, while the ange is the spirit of the flesh that allows the body's cells to function, which I will call the prana or chi. When the body dies, the ange gradually passes into the soil, leading to the decomposition of the corpse over 18 months. The zombification is the spiritual component residing in the sky, representing an individual star of destiny and the blueprint for their future. I will call this the higher self. The gros bon ange is the life force shared by all sentient beings, sustaining the body's life and returning to God upon death. I will name this the spirit. The ti bon ange is associated with an individual's personality, character, and willpower. It is the essence of one's individuality. I think this will be the soul, and this is the one that is vulnerable to sorcery. In the Voodoo tradition, the ti bon ange, the soul, can be extracted from the body and placed into a clay jar called a canary, allowing it to continue animating the living while under the protection of the Haungan, the white magic practitioner. After death, the Haungan can reclaim it and deposit it into another clay jar, a govi. At this point, they will call the ti bon ange the esprit, which is fed and clothed before being released to the forest to dwell in trees and grottos, awaiting rebirth. After multiple incarnations, the esprit ultimately becomes part of the cosmic breath known as Jo. Over successive generations, the individual identified with the esprit transforms from the ancestor of a particular lineage into the generalized ancestor of all mankind. It is from this ancestral pool that the Loa emerges as archetypes. In Voodoo, people worship the Loa, considered as various expressions of God. These spirits possess significant power and, if offended, can cause great harm. However, they are also predictable, and when appeased, they generously bestow health, fertility, and prosperity. I will cover the Loa of the Voodoo faith in a separate video in the future, but for now, one example of a Loa is Ogoun, the spirit of fire and metallurgical elements. During religious ceremonies, the Loa are often summoned by the rhythmic beats of drums or the vibration of bells, and they enter the individual during possession, causing a complete loss of consciousness and sense of self. The possessed person becomes the spirit, embodying its persona and abilities. When possessed by Ogoun, who exhibits a warrior's passion for fire and steel, individuals often handle glowing embers without harm. Thus, we can observe the profound spiritual journey in Haitian Voodoo, from human to ancestor, ancestor to become the Loa, and the Loa back to man, in the form of possession. Coming back to the zombie phenomenon, a zombie is an example where this natural journey is disrupted because the ti bon ange, the soul, gets captured by a Bokor through magical means. This usually happens through an unnatural death caused by sorcery and the graveyard ceremony. The Bokor can cause an unnatural death, necessary for zombification, by using a slow-acting poison directly applied to the intended victim. This poison contains tetrodotoxin, inducing a state of apparent death. The graveyard ceremony involves the Bokor calling for the name of the victim. Many of the victims mentioned that they felt themselves drifting like a soul and not fully in their body, only coming back into their body at the moment of hearing the call of their name. At the moment of the calling of the victim, the ti bon ange of the victim has been captured by the Bokor. The victim is now a zombie, but this zombie is made up of 2 parts based on the division of the victim's spiritual components. The spirit zombie, or zombie of the ti bon ange, is stored in a jar and can be transformed into various entities, such as insects, animals, or humans, to carry out the Bokor's tasks. The remaining spiritual components, the ange, the gros bon ange, and the zombification, form the zombie cadavre, or the zombie of the flesh. This information means that the preparation without this magical process will not lead to a zombie. The powders used by the Bokor do not create zombies directly, it is the magical force of the Bokor that plays the central role. Resurrecting the zombie cadavre requires sophisticated magical knowledge. The Bokor must prevent the normal transformations of the spiritual components that would occur during death. The implication is also that even if a victim physically dies from too high a concentration of tetrodotoxin, it is still possible to revive the physical body through this magical process. 3 further illustrations in the book would hopefully cement this understanding that what scientific reasoning gives for the formation of a zombie is a simplistic understanding of a much more complex and magical process. The first illustration concerns the so-called antidote for zombies. Initially, the author believed this antidote was administered to zombie victims during their resurrection in the graveyard. However, the Bokors insisted that the antidote did not revive the zombies, that it was solely the Bokor's power that revived the dormant zombie. The antidote they do use merely counteracted the poisons, including tetrodotoxin, used in the preparation. As an ethnobotanist, the author examined the antidote and found it chemically inert, offering no scientific explanation for reversing the effects of tetrodotoxin. For completeness, I will list the ingredients of the antidote: dried or fresh leaves from 6 plants: aloe, aloe vera, guaiac, Guaiacum officinale, cedra, Cedrella odorata, Bois caca, Capparis cynophilofera, Bois chandelle, Amyris marittima, and Cadavra gate, Capparis sp, a quarter ounce of rock salt, 10 crushed mothballs, a cup of seawater, several ounces of claren or cane alcohol, a bottle of perfume, a quarter liter of a solution called magie noir or black magic, ground human bones, shavings from a mule's tibia and a dog's skull, various colored talcs with magical names, ground match heads, and sulfur powder. The final product was a green liquid with a strong ammonia scent. The second illustration involved the author being introduced to a poison made solely from human remains, including ground leg bone, forearm, and skull mixed with dried and pulverized bits of cadaver. The poison, when sprinkled in the form of a cross on the ground while naming the victim, caused violent convulsions, or if added to the victim's food, would cause immediate and permanent death. This poison was said to be even more potent than the one made with puffer fish. Finally, as a third illustration, one zombie victim, whom we will call M here, talked in the book about how he was finally saved via a magical process after trying numerous treatments without help. The treatment was administered by a mambo, a priestess in the Artibonite region. On the critical night, the mambo followed a series of ritualistic steps. She bound M's jaw, inserted cotton into his nostrils, and dressed him in clothing associated with the deceased. His feet and hands were tied, and he was placed in a narrow trench dug into the ground. A white sheet covered his entire body, and on top of it were placed a thunderstone, the skulls of a human and a dog, and a sucker of a banana plant. 7 candles, cradled in orange peels, were arranged around the grave, and calabashes were placed by his head, on his abdomen, and at his feet. These 3 offerings represented sacred concepts: the crossroad, the cemetery, and the spirit of the forest, Grands Bwa. The mambo straddled the grave and invoked Gide, the spirit of the dead. She took a live chicken and passed it slowly over his body, breaking each of the bird's limbs to extract the death spirit from corresponding parts of his body. Then, she took the chicken's head in her mouth and bit it off, using its blood to touch M. Afterward, M felt the contents of the calabashes massaged into his skin, water splashed on his face, and hot oil and wax from the lamps applied to his chest. He heard the breaking of a water jar, and pieces of hardened clay fell into the grave. While still immobile in the ground, M counted 7 handfuls of earth taken from the crossroads, the cemetery, and the forest landing on his shroud. The mambo's sharp cry signaled him to leave the ground, and the others hastily filled the loose dirt while 2 men pulled Marcel out of the grave. He was anointed again in blood and spent the night in the sanctity of the temple. I would love to hear your comments on the zombie phenomenon after watching this video. If you are interested in topics of paranormal nature, feel free to visit my channel and explore my other videos.